David, the shepherd boy, David, the man after God's heart, David on the run against Saul, David the warrior, David the king. But after his sin with Bathsheba, God said the sword would never depart from his house. So now we are seeing his house. We are seeing David the father. And what have we seen? In the last chapter, David failed to deal with his son Amnon after Amnon raped his sister Tamar. We didn't see David go to his daughter Tamar to perhaps comfort her in her desolation, especially since David had been the one to send her to Amnon's house. This chapter focuses on David and Absalom. Absalom is the one who killed Amnon for what he did to Tamar. Absalom fled, and we were told at the end of chapter 13 that he was in exile for 3 years and that David's heart longed to go out to him. Let's see what happens. I'm in 2 Samuel chapter 14 verse 1, reading from the New American Standard Version. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was inclined toward Absalom. Joab, remember, is commander of David's army. He's also David's nephew. He knows David very well. David is torn between his role as king and his role as father. As king, he must dispense justice. Absalom should be put to death for the murder of Amnon. But his father's heart goes out to Absalom, and Joab perceives this. Continuing verse 2. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought a wise woman from there and said to her, Please pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning garments now, and do not anoint yourself with oil, but be like a woman who has been mourning for the dead many days. Then go to the king and speak to him in this manner. So Joab put the words in her mouth. So this is an interesting move. Joab sees that David's heart is inclined toward his son. So he puts this scheme into motion, and you wonder, is this for David's benefit? Joab just wants to reunite father and son? Or will Joab benefit somehow? And it could be that Joab thinks that this will benefit the nation of Israel and the future of the throne. In any case, he apparently recognizes that a direct appeal won't work, so he goes with pretense. This is not the same as God sending the prophet Nathan to David with a story to convict him. It says Joab put the words in her mouth. Continuing verse 4. Now, when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself and said, Help, O king. The king said to her, What is your trouble? And she answered, Truly, I am a widow, for my husband is dead. Your maidservant had 2 sons, but the 2 of them struggled together in the field, and there was no one to separate them. So one struck the other and killed him. Now behold, the whole family has risen against your maidservant, and they say, Hand over the one who struck his brother, that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed, and destroy the heir also. Thus they will extinguish my coal which is left, so as to leave my husband neither name nor remnant on the face of the earth. So Joab gives this woman a story to tell that is somewhat similar to Amnon and Absalom. One brother kills the other, except in the story, this wasn't premeditated murder. They got in a fight and one ended up dead. It would seem under the law, in this circumstance, her son could flee to a city of refuge. But in her story, the family wants to put the son to death, and her husband would have no heir. Continuing verse 8, Then the king said to the woman, Go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you. The woman of Tekoa said to the king, O my lord the king, the iniquity is on me and my father's house, but the king and his throne are guiltless. So the king said, Whoever speaks to you, bring him to me, and he will not touch you anymore. So David's first response is, Go home, I'll consider this and render my decision later. But the woman wants a decision now. So she says, The iniquity is on me, not on you. You don't have to wait and worry that you might be implicated in this. However you decide this, O king, I will bear the iniquity. You are guiltless. So David says, Whoever bothers you, just bring him to me. I'll fix that. Verse 11, Then she said, Please let the king remember the Lord your God, so that the avenger of blood will not continue to destroy. Otherwise, they will destroy my son. And he said, As the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So she says, it's fine that you're protecting me and saying no one will touch me, but they're about to destroy my son. I need a decision regarding him. And David gives it. No harm will come to her son. Continuing verse 12, Then the woman said, Please let your maidservant speak a word to my lord the king. And he said, Speak. The woman said, Why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? For in speaking this word, the king is as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring back his banished one. For we will surely die and are like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away life, but plans ways so that the banished one will not be cast out from him. Now, the reason I have come to speak this word to my lord the king is that the people have made me afraid. So your maidservant said, Let me now speak to the king. Perhaps the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy both me and my son from the inheritance of God. Then your maidservant said, Please let the word of my lord the king be comforting. For as the angel of God, so is my lord the king to discern good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you. So once this woman got a decision from David about her son, she turns the tables to his son. You would pardon my son, whom you do not know, but why haven't you brought back your own son, the banished one? Remember, David himself knew the pain of feeling banished. In 1 Samuel 26, David was saying to Saul, What have I done? Why are you pursuing me? He said this in verse 19, If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is men, cursed are they before the Lord. For they have driven me out today so that I would have no attachment with the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go, serve other gods. And as we see in this chapter, this woman appeals to God, saying, God does not take away life, but plans ways so that the banished one will not be cast out from him. She's saying God is merciful, and David knows that mercy firsthand. God told David he had taken away his sin and he would not die. The woman also says, the people have made me afraid, and that there are people who would destroy her and her son, which is akin to David fearing what the people might say or do if he pardons his son. And she says David is able to discern good and evil. She trusts that he will make a wise decision regarding his son. Continuing verse 18, Then the king answered and said to the woman, Please do not hide anything from me that I am about to ask you. And the woman said, Let my lord the king please speak. So the king said, Is the hand of Joab with you in all this? And the woman replied, As your soul lives, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. Indeed, it was your servant Joab who commanded me, and it was he who put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant. In order to change the appearance of things, your servant Joab has done this thing. But my Lord is wise, like the wisdom of the angel of God, to know all that is in the earth. As soon as the woman points out David's discernment, he discerns that Joab is behind all this. Joab knew just what to have this woman say in order for David to see the situation differently. Just as with Nathan, David was able to see a third party's situation better than he could see his own. Continuing verse 21, then the king said to Joab, behold now, I will surely do this thing. Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom. Joab fell on his face to the ground, prostrated himself, and blessed the king. Then Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, O my lord the king, in that the king has performed the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. However, the king said, let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face. So Absalom turned to his own house and did not see the king's face. Why did David do this? Some say David did not fully forgive his son. He brought him back, but he was punishing him still. Others say David was wise in doing this, that he was giving Absalom more time to repent. I only wonder, how would he know that Absalom wasn't repentant unless he saw him face to face? Maybe by not seeing Absalom, we find out that 2 years pass. Maybe it only hardened Absalom's heart. But Absalom clearly has issues. We saw it in the last chapter, and he is about to rev up again. Continuing verse 25. Now in all Israel was no one as handsome as Absalom, so highly praised. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no defect in him. When he cut the hair of his head, and it was at the end of every year that he cut it, for it was heavy on him, so he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels by the king's weight. To Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. Now Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem and did not see the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. So he sent again a second time, but he would not come. Therefore he said to his servants, see, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. So Absalom says, I have had it. I am tired of waiting. It's interesting, though, he waited 2 years before he took action and murdered Amnon. He was in Geshur for 3 years. Now he's been back in Jerusalem for 2 years. 5 years since he's seen his father, the king. He wants to see him, but it is not happening. And of course, Joab won't come. He has to do as the king wishes. So Absalom says, if I can't get what I want, somebody will pay. And he gets Joab's attention. Continuing verse 31, then Joab arose, came to Absalom at his house, and said to him, why have your servants set my field on fire? Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent for you, saying, come here, that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me still to be there. Now therefore, let me see the king's face. And if there is iniquity in me, let him put me to death. If there is iniquity in me, you killed your brother. Premeditated murder. The statement makes me wonder if Absalom is truly repentant. He says it would be better if he had stayed in Geshur. But how could it be better in a foreign land outside of God's presence? Again, you have to wonder where his heart is. He wants to see the king's face, but does he have any interest in seeking the face of God? And verse 33, so when Joab came to the king and told him, he called for Absalom. Thus he came to the king and prostrated himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. I would like to say, and they all lived happily ever after, but we can't forget what God said. The sword will never depart from your house. It's about to get ugly. And yet these last words, and the king kissed Absalom. He could have had his son put to death for murder. He could have at least rebuked him, even for burning Joab's field. He extends mercy, as God extended mercy to David when he sinned. Mercy is humbling when you do not get what you deserve. It's hard to even fathom God's mercy unto us. Ephesians 2 says we were dead in our trespasses and sins. Verse 4, but God, being rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. Because of his love, because he's rich in mercy, we are saved. It's because of his mercy that we're even able to cling to him, that he wants us to cling to him. May we remember always God's mercy unto us, and may we extend that mercy to others.